What's bonkin', everybody, and welcome to Take Your Time, a Persona 5 Strikers podcast where we play Strikers not in real time, but alongside the in-game calendar dates and take the time to talk about it, pick it apart. I am your host, Tom Marks, joined as always by Jonathon Dornbush. Jonathan!
Tom, we really set along this journey to play games in real time, and then second season in, we're just like, we're going to kind of skip around with it a little bit, but...
This is a half season.
Okay, that's fair.
This is the equivalent of an anime movie, where, like, we're going to have fun, there's going to be some silly things happening, but then no one will ever talk about it again in the regular season.
Of course.
We'll just pretend it didn't happen later.
No, naturally, yeah. If they ever... It would be really funny if they do make a Persona 5-2 and just act like Strikers never happened and be like, what? What? What are you talking about?
I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, but we'll see. Of course, one of the things we want to say just at the start is thank you to everyone who left comments, responded, tweeted at us for episode 0. There was a really lovely outpouring of support, and it was very nice to hear from you all. Obviously, we love to hear from folk. Anybody who watched our Persona 5 Royal playthrough or listened to it will know that we love reading reader comment or viewer comments and kind of involving y'all in the show. That's one of the reasons we decided to start the show at all. So it's great to hear from you. And if you want to leave comments as we go along this, please do so. Just to plug it at the top of the show, I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter. He's at JM Dornbush. And then we also have youtube.com/Dornology. You can leave comments on the YouTube video version, and also email us at dornology@gmail.com. So that's kind of all the places you can reach out if you're just joining us. We love to hear from you.
Yeah, I do gotta say, it is really funny that after years of, both of us have done podcasting for years, obviously, like, to varying degrees, but I still say reader comments all the time.
Yeah.
I still do.
Yeah.
Even though there are people who listen and watch. But anyway, thank you to everyone out there.
I don't know. The telephone icon on your phone is still, like, one of those, like, barbell type things, so everything is vestigial at some point, and that's fine.
Kids don't know what that symbol is.
So, real quick, what we're doing here, let's do a recap for those who didn't watch episode 0 or listen to episode 0. We're playing through Persona 5 Strikers. We're going to be talking about its nitty-gritty, talk about our favorite story moments, talk about mechanics, really dig into this stuff. We mentioned in the first episode that we're trying to play this one a little more loosey-goosey because our schedules are a little complicated. This game can't really be played in real time in the way that Persona 5 was, or you can, but it's a much more condensed experience because it's about a 40 to 50 hour game in the course of a month rather than a 150 hour game over the course of 10. So it's a little bit of a different vibe, and we're trying to adapt to that and make it fit to our schedule so we can still do this. That starts with this episode, which we told you in episode 0 we were going to be going through the entire first, as we now know it's called, a jail, right? Basically the equivalent of a palace. Then we started and we dove into it, and we were like, wow, this intro is really dense and long. So what we've decided to do is actually break this into 2 episodes just for this start. Our intention going forward is still going to be basically try to have, talk about story stuff and then talk about the palace all in one sort of go. This time we're going to give the intro the time it deserves. We're going to talk about kind of the setup of it, some of the new characters, what's going on here, and then next week we'll actually do the proper jail and kind of go to that point that we were talking about before, which is, without spoilers, kind of as the adventure actually gets started. There's like a story beat right after the final boss, and I think it'll become clear kind of what that is. On that note, we had a lot of people asking, hey, do I stop at the boss or do I stop afterwards, or what's going on? Because we're not going with exact dates in the way we did before, we'd encourage you to overplay rather than under, just so you don't get stuff spoiled, and also just kind of do whatever works for you. This is, like I said, this is a little bit loosey-goosier of a run.
Yeah, there's not as strict, like you were saying, of a day cutoff. Like, I think even technically here where we're cutting off is in the middle of a day, technically.
Yeah.
To where the palace start is for sort of where our jail start is for the end of this episode. But for next week's episode, you know, if you played everything through for this episode 1, apologies if you rushed through it for any sort of reason, but thank you, you know, for playing along. You'll just be ahead for next week's episode. But there's, as Tom has alluded to, this was sort of the part I got up to when I first played Strikers a long time ago and then stopped. There's a thing you get, and it's a big thing, and you'll know that thing, and then you can kind of stop there, I think is the good way to put it.
Yeah, that's ambiguous enough.
Yeah.
But let's get into it.
Yeah.
The dates of this episode, because we do have them, because there's still a calendar, even if we're not playing quite in real time, are July 23rd to about halfway through July 27th. And we'll get into why the halfway stop is there, but let's kick things off as we rejoin the Phantom Thieves in an intro that mirrors Persona 5, right? Mm-hmm. But not quite as what's the right way to put it? Not quite as like hooky as Persona 5.
It definitely has a little bit of the like you know who these people are sort of ish to it. Yeah, like it's a cool thing is happening, but it's not as bombastic as the opening. You're talking about sort of like the in metaverse opening bit,
yeah,
right?
so you start off with Joker, a cutscene of Joker on a rooftop getting attacked in the metaverse, right? Getting attacked by a wild helicopter shadow thing, and then you fight a bunch of dudes, and this is kind of the intro to the combat really quick, and then it says, oh, and you go back in time a little bit, and then suddenly you're picking up actually. So it does this tease of something in the future. But the difference is that this scene that we see is like we've already now, even just in this intro that we're going to be talking about, been to the location of that scene, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the one in Persona 5, the base game, set up the story of this idea of like, oh, you get arrested, someone sold you out, you were in this crazy casino, who are all these people talking to you, and it it acted as a narrative device in a way that this one kind of didn't. This one was just sort of an allusion to that, right? And still a fun little kind of throw you into the fire intro.
Yeah, it's fun to, I think, immediately present the idea to you of like, oh, combat's going to be different in this game. This is not, turn-based Persona and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's very much not like this is going to pay off in 70 hours and it's going to frame the rest of the story up. No, it's like, this is just a kind of like fun little tease they wanted to do. And I think it speaks to like, I think you've said it, I think Barrett has said it to me as well, our friend of the show, Barrett Courtney, that like you were saying earlier, this is sort of the anime movie versus anime TV season. And it's like, it's kind of just more getting you hyped for what's coming rather than setting up like the story of what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, and it's still fun, right?
Yeah.
It's, I like that they reference it kind of cheekily, especially because this is kind of a trend that you'll see as we continue to talk about this game, is that is a lot of what this is, right? It is taking the mechanics and the themes and the ideas of Persona 5 and saying, okay, but what if we like not oversimplified, but like condensed that into a much smaller package? And how would we do that? Sorry?
And actionified it a little bit.
Yeah, and actionified it. Yeah.
A real word.
Now it is. Yeah. Because the combat is very different, obviously, and you do get a taste of that here. But you only get a moment of that. The actual combat tutorial kind of comes later, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then you get, obviously, the lovely music animated intro scene, which is great. I love it. I love the whole bit of them throwing the phone around.
And I'm thinking a little bit back to the first time I played it as well, so I'm definitely curious for like what people feel as they're playing it, if it is their first time as they're listening. But like, man, I so remember just this feeling, and I felt it again this time too, of like, I'm back with them, especially after spending a full year with them like we did, to be back with the and there's a scene in particular that comes up that it really is like almost a meta moment of you're back. But it like having that intro, having this hype moment in the beginning, having it sort of feel like that flow but be a different game was like, okay, yeah, I'm back with the Phantom Thieves. Like it's home. It's a little bit different, but it's home to an extent. And then
it's a really good feeling, and you immediately get to talk to them after the cutscene. There's this little group text of them all sort of chiming in and being themselves again, right? Yeah. with the funniest bit within that is Yusuke being like, I haven't been able to text you because I didn't have any money and my service was cut off.
I wrote immediately a Yusuke is poor joke. I was like, oh yeah, they're just going straight. And again, it's a little bit of the, like, they need to hit the touchstones of what you think of when you think of the characters. And obviously that was a very recurring thread that Yusuke has no money in P5. But yeah, it's very like here's the characters you remember with like one quick bit of dialogue to kind of get you back into the flow.
Yeah. And then we go to a very different scene, which is a meeting in like a police station of the police discussing incidents of people going crazy or changing personalities happening all over the nation, and how they suspect that it's the Phantom Thieves at work, and that the higher-ups are hell-bent on closing this case, and everyone's priority is to investigate the Phantom Thieves. And the really interesting thing that I really dig that is super different from kind of similar conversations in the first game is that they put Joker's face up on the screen and are like, this is the known leader of the Phantom Thieves. Go investigate this guy.
Yeah, it straight just gets to like, these kids are trouble. We gotta look into him. I do think we get the inspector's name here as well.
Yeah,
Inspector
Hasegawa.
Hasegawa, yeah, and they're kind of all talking about whether this is like those old cases, whether it's something different. Right. You know, if it's that cut and dry seems to be really the friction in the scene, but it sounds like there is higher up pressure in the police department to just get this done, and the most obvious suspect should just be the thing they go after.
Yeah. And he's the one he's kind of like framed sort of as like the central point of this thing, right? Like the camera's right next to him, although you don't see his face, it's all from behind him or whatever. And he's the one who, when they're talking about the incident, says, it sounds like the Phantom Thieves, and everyone's like, you're crazy, and they're like, actually no, he's not crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's framed a little bit as an important character. Ooh, we'll find out more, right? Like that sort of thing. And we do actually see him again later in this episode, so we'll talk about that. And that's the first day. We actually get the calendar as it jumps to July 24th.
Oh, wait, hold on. Before I went to bed, I went to the batting cages.
All right.
Definitely not going to make that joke every week. But no, yeah, we skip ahead.
Joker and Morgana on a train, going to Young and Jaya. You're back together, and you're going to Leblanc because in the text message conversation you said, hey, it's summer vacation, let's all meet up and hang out. And so you decide to meet up at the hideout and are going to do that. There's a intercom kind of message that is not really interesting at the time, but immediately comes up later, talking about how the tech company Medice, I believe is how it's pronounced, says is finally profitable after releasing their new AI assistant, which is, you learn very quickly later, is Emma, which is going to come up, I think, this episode or this day. So they're starting to seed even really early before you kind of know to look for it. They're seeding ideas of Emma and Medice being important.
Which is, I think we always talked about Persona 5 doing really well. Obviously, this game, I think, has to do stuff like that on a faster track, which is kind of the case there. But yeah, it's a fun little thing. I had forgotten about the Emma of it all, so I immediately was writing down like, this seems very pointed to have for several lines of dialogue. Let me just write all that down real quick. And then, yeah, of course, it came up a little bit later. But yeah.
Yeah. So you get, I really like this moment before you go into Leblanc too. You get a chance to just like walk around Young and Jaya, and there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
But you can, check in on the shop, check in on the antiques dealer, go to the batting cages and be like, I remember doing that. That was fun. Like, it's it lets you enjoy the nostalgia of it.
Yeah, you can go to the shop and it's like, he's selling a bunch of weird stuff like usual. Yeah. It's a nice little here's the area you remember. It's not going to be as much of a focus, but yeah.
Yeah. This is also the moment where, with all due respect to the developers, it is amazingly impressive how close they got everything to look and feel like P5 without being, like they had to rebuild this, right? It's not, I don't believe it's the same engine because it's a completely different fighting. It's like a fighting game engine.
Yeah.
It is so funny if you've played a ton of Persona 5 or Royal, how different, just slightly different. Like your move speed's just like a little bit different. Like the color is just like a little bit different.
Yeah, one like the camera angle I think is a little bit more up and whatnot as you're running around.
It's all just like a little bit off. It's like a Bizarro World version of the game.
And it's like, I think to a certain extent it helps set up the idea that it will be a different game, and then I think like all that stuff kind of ties into the way that the gameplay plays out, and I think it makes sense there. But yeah, it's definitely, I think also to a certain degree it's the fact that it's all sharper, and you especially notice a little later on, or at least I did, but like because Persona 5 was originally made to be on PS3 and PS4 and like is a bit of an older looking game, and this was made a bit more several years later, so it looks cleaner, like sharper, but it still wants to be the world that you knew. And so there's an interesting balance happening there.
It's just like it's like the location and like movement version of the Uncanny Valley for me.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Where I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And it's fine because, again, the fact that they got this close is remarkable and impressive, and it's not a problem. It's just like one of those things that I noticed immediately where I was like, why am I moving at a slightly different speed?
Yeah. This is a very dumb question. I'm hating myself for not remembering. What was the button to talk, like to do things, basically? Was it circle in the original game?
I don't think so.
I was like, I don't think this is circle. That was the thing that threw me the most, was like, I don't remember pressing circle this much. And this is like insane because we played the game for 10 months straight, and I should remember what the button prompt was I used the most, but it's just like my head is there. But I think it's like, again, a change of things. It's just, acclimating to a world that but that is slightly different. It's not bad, it's just slightly changed.
Anyway, let's get into the actual story of it, because you enter Leblanc and it's dark and nobody's there. Oh wait, it's a surprise party. Who could have known? And this is the moment I had for also that moment you were talking about of like, everyone's together again. I think one of the greatest strengths, if you're coming off of, obviously, one of the things I think we talked about in episode 0, and I will reiterate here, if you have not played Persona 5, I have no idea if this game would be entertaining in literally any way, shape, or form.
Like, maybe at its purest, you will enjoy the action gameplay.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of story setup, in terms of moments, like, this is so emotional for a Persona 5 player in a way that I can't imagine it is at all emotional for someone who's never played. At least I just assume.
Yeah. And you get one of the greatest strengths of this game to me is that you spent so long kind of knowing or getting to know these characters and learning about them and spending time with them. And I love that this is an environment where you can just start the game with your whole party hanging out. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's cool, because you immediately get this conversation where they start to make their summer vacation plans, and everyone gets a little moment to be themselves here and there, or make a joke that they would make, and you get to learn about what they've been doing, right? Makoto and Haru are in college now. Haru's taking business classes, but also doing, like, gardening classes on the side, and, like, Yusuke is still, like, painting and poor, and Futaba is in high school and doing well in like, you get these moments to learn about what these people have been doing in a really interesting way. And it feels so good if you're a fan of this game already, or of the last game.
No, JRPGs are often, especially like party-based ones, obviously so built on the building the party up and getting them as the story. So yeah, like getting the chance to just immediately jump in, and that's literally true with the gameplay a little later on that we'll talk about probably next episode. But a thing that I really, really loved about the scene that I just wanted to point out, that again is that, like, for me it is as a returning fan is why it works, is like when you walk in and everyone's saying like welcome home to you, it's in first person, because like you, the player, are literally being like welcomed back. Like, this is, for me, like, especially now having played the game twice, like the cafe feels like home a little bit. Like, it is the place I go back to. And so to literally have them be welcoming the player from that first person perspective is like, yeah, you're back. We're happy to have you back. This is going to be fun with the whole gang. Yeah.
And Sojiro's there too, and he's a super friendly. He's like immediately nice, right? Like, you don't have to deal with the like jerk Sojiro part of the beginning.
But if you never did, man, it doesn't hit as much, because of the fact that he's so immediately kind of like he does still remember and love us.
Yeah. He missed you.
Anyway,
I think I'm a big softie. I love that Sojiro misses you.
It's so great. Sojiro's the best.
And everyone is just like, yeah, welcome home, right? Like it's just like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
I feel bad for whoever Joker's parents are because they do not get any respect, but that's okay.
I mean, at this point, we don't.
They did send him off.
They did. Yeah. They let him be framed. There's a whole. Yeah. You should go play Persona 5 if you don't know what we're talking about. But anyway.
So the conversation that happens in Joker's room doesn't have like a ton of substance to it, right? Like it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of stuff going on, but one of the things that I think is indicative of this entire sort of intro, which takes 2.5 hours to get to the point we're going to be talking about or stop at, is that it's a lot of setup and it's a lot of sort of just like, it feels like recapping characters in case you didn't play the last game, right? So just giving you a little bit of each person and telling you a little bit about each person, because there are the other side of this sword is that there are a lot of characters and you want to give them all time and you want to know who they all are, and like, so there's a lot to get through. The kind of main substance of what they talk about is that it's summer vacation. They want to go on, a trip, go camping is what they eventually decide, and go hang out and enjoy their summer. And so they decide to go camping, and in order to help enabling doing this, you download an app called Emma, which is that Emma app that the train conveniently mentioned earlier, which is a virtual assistant AI that basically you can just like ask anything and it will just do it or help you do it in like very like casual language, and any sort of problem question you could ask, it will just help you solve in the best possible way. For example, they say, hey, we want to go camping, can you help with this? And Emma says, yeah, here's a list of all the things you should buy and where you can buy them.
Yeah, it is a supercharged version of the AI assistants that I will not say their name to accidentally set off anyone's in their homes, as I've learned people sometimes have done on podcasts. But it's for me, it's really funny because it's so clear. Like, I think it's a few years after like AI assistants really became a big thing, but like very clearly the writers were like, there's something with the assistants that we all have on our phones and watches now. Like, we could do something with that. But I mean, it is definitely, they're going to explore this theme kind of more, but I really do appreciate that they decided to take sort of a topical idea and sort of do some fun things with it, because this idea of this AI comes up again later, as we'll see. Yeah. So you get Emma downloaded. You friend everybody on it. You say, boy, great, we're going to go shop for this stuff that Emma told us to buy tomorrow. And then you go to bed, basically. And you have a nice little moment with Morgana, where Morgana's like, yay, we're back here in this room sleeping on these egg cartons. And Morgana has some very kind of oddly worded line about, like, there's a lot of memories in this bed. And it's like, all right, Morgana. Okay. I mean, hey, in the Royal version, that's doubly true since, well, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't played Royal, I guess, and you're listening, but Morgana went through some stuff.
Indeed.
But yeah, and then we go to bed and nothing happens.
Oh, wait, there is actually one more moment that I wanted to mention from that day, which is when everyone's leaving. Ryuji, I know I've banged the Ryuji drum a million times in the last season. Ryuji is so adorable. Ryuji is like the one who started the text message conversation. He's so excited to see you, and then when you're leaving, he's like almost tearing up. He's like, I'm just so happy you're back. Like, he's just so cute.
Yeah, it's funny because I think you can still read it as and like I talked about this a lot in our Persona 5 season, but originally Ryuji's presented as this very like loud, crass guy, and there's that side to him for sure, but he does have this very sweet undertone to him, and I'm glad that shines through, I think, so much so quickly here. Yeah.
Anyway, you go to sleep and you go to the Velvet Room. Oh no, something is wrong. Whoever could have seen this coming. So you go to the Velvet Room, you wake up in the prison again. Igor, whatever, is not there, but Lavenza is. Spoilers if you haven't played Persona already. It's just like, this is the thing. If you haven't played Persona 5, I don't know why you'd play this game. It would just be so remarkably confusing.
But I am sure that there were people out there, at least when this first came out, that tried it who hadn't played. Because that, like, it's worth saying, you know, at the start of it, obviously things are going to change in just a couple months from when we're recording. But P5 was obviously only on PlayStation, but Strikers was on Switch, PlayStation, and Windows. So it's like...
Yeah, it was on PC.
It was a wider audience for people. In general. Thank you.
Throwing those people to the wolves.
Well, it was that weird thing of, like, if you didn't have Persona, or if you didn't have a PlayStation, you couldn't have at least, like, legally played P5. And so I wonder how many people went in with, like, reading a story recap because they're like, I've heard so much good stuff about P5 that I need to check this out. Like, I'm sure there are people, but man, we cannot recommend enough, especially with 5 coming out. Just go start there.
Yeah, because you also have these moments where it's like Lavenza, and she has to kind of explain who she is.
But not too much.
Yeah, which she wouldn't have to do to Joker in any way. Yeah. But she explains, because this room exists, because the Velvet Room exists, that means the world is in danger again, somehow. And Joker has once again become a prisoner of fate, and if the world is left to its own devices, it will be destroyed, and you have to do something about it. Bye.
Yeah, pretty much. It does do a little bit of that, like, sequelitis dialogue of, like, this could be even worse than what you faced before. Like, this could be a greater challenge for you, and you're like, I got this. We're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it just helps set up that side of it, because as we learn a little later, we'll be going back to the Velvet Room. But,
yep.
Yeah.
And in fact, we'll be going back to the metaverse immediately. So,
Whoa.
July 24th ends. July 25th comes along. You and Ryuji go shopping in Shibuya for camping stuff, which is nice. Again, just like it's fun that it lets you just sort of like wander a little bit. Or it might be the investigation scene in the next one where it gives you an opportunity to kind of wander around these areas here and there, which is nice.
Yeah.
But you meet up with Ryuji, and immediately get distracted, basically, because there's this basically idol. She's like a fashion designer and singer named Alice Hiiragi, who is doing a store opening event nearby, and Ryuji is a super big fan, so they rush over to do that, and she's this very quirky, eccentric, like Alice in Wonderland dressed character.
She's got like a card in her hair, and
yeah,
she keeps telling everyone, like, come to Wonderland, or like whatever she says. She just keeps saying that, sort of like really hitting home the
yeah, and people love her, and she gives out these invite cards that have her Emma keyword on them, which is Wonderland, that will let you basically like add her as a friend, which is like also just like, I know it's just like mixing things and it's fine, but like it is so funny to me that this AI assistant app has like a friend list on it. Like, I just don't understand. But I guess everything, like, Venmo is a social media platform too for some reason, so like it's not unrealistic or anything.
Yeah, you know, I only keep up with you on Venmo, so that makes sense. Yeah, I only want to know what you're purchasing. But yeah, no, it's kind of like everything has done that to this point, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But I don't have Schmalerxa friend list, I guess, to say. I'm really trying not to say the name to affect people. I know how annoying that is. But
you can say Siri, right? Because don't you have to say hey before that for it to matter?
I guess, or Google as well. Yeah. I need
if it literally went off, if one of those assistants went off anytime you said the word Google, that would be like a problem.
Oh, man.
I feel like.
Yeah. Because Google has replaced search as the verb. It's the same thing with like Kleenex isn't what that is, but you call them Kleenex.
Band-Aid. There's a lot of those.
Anyway, Persona. God, we're only on episode 1. The tangents have begun. But no, yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, it makes it easy for the plot convenience. For me, the thing that was stranger was just like, I don't know idol culture super well. Obviously, I'm not going to pretend to, but I would assume you can't have this close a relationship to them. Like, I assume it's usually a pretty more like manicured, held back sort of thing. But
I don't know.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know.
Either way, Joker gets a friend card. Hooray! And it specifically is like she's saying that it'll like invite you to a wonderland, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the wording is kind of intentionally weird there because as you find out, you're like, oh, okay, we'll enter her keyword into Emma, and immediately Emma says beginning navigation, and you end up in the freaking metaverse.
Just so quick.
Just right away. I criticized the game for having a long intro, but it does just sort of throw you in there pretty quick too.
Yeah, it's a longer intro until you get to the like main, palace infiltration part, but I think it needs it to establish everything, to get the changes going, to all that sort of stuff. P5, you can argue, has a bit of a long, for many people, sort of the first palace is almost the intro for Persona 5. So
Yeah. And the opening of Persona 5 is very long too. It feels like a different pace of game than this.
For sure.
And so it's like, it's a little funny to me. But I love that it just is like, oh, okay, you're in the metaverse now, and you and Joker and Ryuji and Morgana are all now suddenly in your Phantom Thieves outfits. And it's like, oh, okay, we're doing this.
We're in.
And you see shadows, you see people who are like the other guys who just got the cards at the event getting their hearts or like their desires stolen out of them by shadows, and there's a warped kind of shadow Alice ruling over all of this area, and it's very like grim Shibuya. There's like a giant crown thing on one of the buildings, right? It's very Wonderland-y, but also spooky Shibuya, and people getting their desires stolen directly from them.
What I like about it is that that like crown topped castle like kind of area in the background is a decent chunk of like a ways away from you. And I do like that, at least for this, and I don't know where future jails go, but it sort of sets up things at a larger scale, because, from P5's beginning, it kind of gradually got to larger chunks of land essentially being tied up in the metaverse, where it was like originally just the school or originally just a building.
Yeah.
And here it's like, no, straight away, a lot of the, area around it is overtaken and affected by the metaverse.
Yeah, it's definitely different, right? Yeah. Like that's a theme of this sort of this whole intro, is that this is very similar to what was happening before, but it is not the same, right? Yeah. Something is happening that is different here. And you immediately get your first major or first real fight, right? Because there was that intro bit, but this is sort of like the combat tutorial, if nothing else, where you're out on the streets of Shibuya tearing through people. They teach you how to use abilities. They teach you how to jump on lampposts and spin around them. I think we're going to save most of our actual combat discussion for next episode, but kind of just like real quickly, I mean, what did you think about the combat? I think the combat is very satisfying to, knock out people, and you get all out attacks all the time, and you jump to the things and spin around, and like you're just like hopping between targets a lot of the time in a way that is very satisfying. I
think, it'll definitely be worth talking about a little bit as we get into the jail, because I think my broad overall feeling, and this is knowing a little bit more of like how detailed it gets, I'm really impressed by how they adapted all of the turn-based ideas and elements of Persona 5 into a more action combat focused game, and retained a lot of it, but didn't make it feel too cumbersome. Like, there's a lot at the end of the day that you can do, and it can be like, you can forget sometimes to use things because there's so much going on as the pace of it. But yeah, I like, at least from the start, I like the variation of using your basic attacks, getting all out attacks, being able to hop away from battle, like just being able to jump in battle and move around is really interesting for me as a like Persona minded fan. Obviously this comes from a developer in a genre that it, has its roots in Muso, and I think people typically think you're just fighting hordes of enemies and you're just mashing the button to attack. And you can do that a little bit here, but I think, as we'll talk about later on, like, you do need to be varying up what you're doing. You do need to understand the weaknesses of the personas. Like, that stuff comes into play, using abilities, jumping around to avoid attacks, using all-out attacks to hit swarms of enemies. It becomes a lot more of a creative combat system.
And to that end, I like that you can just immediately hold a button and pull up your kind of very familiar Persona ability menu, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't freeze time, but it slows it basically to a crawl. And you can very sort of, it's not literally turn-based or anything, but you have moments where you can slow things down and decide strategically what you're going to do with your abilities.
And you can turn based on where you want to hit. Turn-based. Anyway, yes.
Oh, sorry. I see.
Yes.
I get it. Yeah. I got it now.
Thank you.
It's a good joke.
It's funnier when I explain it, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail.
Well, we're going to talk about combat, and I want to talk about combat, but we're going to hold that off because you don't dive into combat a ton this week.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot more to talk about that in the actual jail.
For sure.
So let's keep going. You fight. There's too many of them. You run away. You get caught. You have this encounter with Shadow Alice, who the shadows that captured you said, we couldn't steal these ones' desires. We don't know why. And she said, okay. And is kind of, you get a look at who she is and kind of her sadistic, shadowy side. And she's real mean. And there's
as mean
God.
As those race cars on your street.
Yeah, what the heck was that? That's like one of the weirdest cars I've ever heard drive outside my house. Anyway, so she's real mean. She like knocks Joker in the head, steps on his face, and then she says at some point, she's like, I don't like toys that don't listen. So she throws you in the literal garbage, drops you in this dump, and you're like, we got to get our way out of here. And then we meet the character I've been dying to talk about all episode.
The floating cube.
The floating cube. Joker touches this big box. It glows. You get this moment of like computer readout where it's saying like checking all the systems and it says there's no memory. And then boop, there's a lady there.
My favorite anime trope. Boop, there's a lady there.
Probably a surprisingly common one, to be honest.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
So this cube turns into the character we then meet as Sophia. And Sophia introduces herself as she's Sophia, humanity's companion. And she has no memory, but she knows that her purpose is to help humans. And you're like, what the heck is going on? But she wants to help you leave. And so you say sure, because you don't understand at all what's going on.
Yeah, there's a little bit of like, should they be saying yes at this point? But you do.
Yeah, there's a little bit of suspicion, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a, can we really trust this girl we met in a floating box who doesn't claim to know anything right now? But
right.
Is this the moment, and forgive me because I did like kind of run through some notes here. This is where she does show that she's worth hanging out with, right? Because she helps us in battle. Or is that later?
Yeah, so what happens is you're like, Sophia, hang back, and you do one little fight, and then the next time you see an enemy, she's like, oh, is that person blocking our way to get out? And you say yes, and she's like, okay, and then just like basically becomes like a Persona user with these like boxes and these yo-yo weapons and like totally destroys somebody, and you're like, why didn't you do that before? And she was like, oh, I was just copying you.
Yep.
So she's seemingly not actually a Persona user. She's just mimicking what you did in the change of outfit and the different like the boxes that look like a Persona she's wielding. And if you go into her stats, if you go into her abilities in the menu, all of her abilities are like Koha ? Like it's all like it's not literally she's using magic, she's just doing things, seemingly she's just doing things that look like what you're doing, basically.
Yeah, I think it really well ties in, especially the whole depiction of her throughout this opening, of what is clearly a more like tech-focused aesthetic to this game.
Yeah.
Like, obviously there was the app from the metaverse was there, Futaba was a hacker, all that sort of stuff. But this is very much, like, built into this idea of an AI around the world that everyone's connected to. Sophia's tech stuff that we then learn sort of like the reality of her, at least so far as we go along. But yeah.
I think that's very right. Like even her, when she gets into battle, right, she gets this cute little like face mask thing that has these like digital eyes on it that are very techy in that sense too. Yeah, I love Sophia. Like, let me be really clear when I say, when I was we're not gonna go into full spoilers for Royal, but for anybody who watched the first season, the Royal season of Take Your Time, I said towards the end of it that I liked the new characters in Strikers more than the new characters in Royal. And I think that maybe it'll take some time for for Sophia to grow on folk, but like, she is so adorable and she is so full of personality and charm so quickly, and I just love her as a character. And she does some moments later in this episode too where she like will be like, we have to go through that portal, it'll go all wow 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 wow, and then we'll be back, and it's like, what, who are you? Like, she's just so weird.
Yeah, I'm definitely holding, any thoughts of like direct comparison that way in terms of like which cast I guess I like more until I've seen them in the full game. But I do like this introduction to Sophia, and we'll talk about it a little bit I think through the rest of this episode. But I think they do a good job of playing a little bit to the trope of like, here is a essentially virtual character who doesn't quite understand humanity but knows they are connected to humanity, and so there's like gaps in logic or like a lack of an emotional logic there. There's logic, but it's not as tied to emotion, and there's I think they play with that interestingly here. I'm curious to see how that develops throughout the rest of the game though.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to see this character develop.
Yeah.
And there's something I want to talk about in just a moment, but you have this moment where you meet Sophia, you decide she's going to help you, so okay, and you get the first sort of dungeon crawling section of the game, although obviously it is the first, so it's very linear. You're still only controlling Joker, and you can kind of hop around, get some chests, get some items, fight dudes in these sort of, you get a sense of how it's going to structure the fights, where you're actually walking and you see enemies and then you fight them and you continue. And you make your way out of the sewer, capped off by this sort of pseudo boss, right? Where it's like a much harder version of a shadow that has these shields that you have to knock down to stagger to do more damage, and there's a little bit of a combo-y thing there. So it's basically introduces all of that. One thing I do like about this section is that it mirrors Persona 5 in that the first time you're learning all of this stuff and going through the metaverse stuff, you're only with Ryuji and Morgana, right? Like, as we find out once the jail begins in earnest, you get your whole team right away. There's no system of like, unlock this character, then unlock this character. You have like 8 or 9 playable characters right away, right? So I like this sort of restricted section to ease you into it, where you're only playing as Joker, you're only with that core team that was there at the very beginning of the first game too. I like that.
No, yeah, I think this game does a good job of echoing the first game in ways like that, where it's not trying to do the same thing, obviously, but it wants... I think it very clearly wants you to know that it cares about what came before, that this isn't just trying to be too disparate or anything like that. Because it is a different development team. Like, there might have been some worries before it came out of like, will they capture the Persona spirit? And I think they're trying to do a lot to show you like, we're trying to do it. And I think they do for the most part, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Sophia finds you an escape, finds you a portal, is reluctant to go through the portal, but then goes through the portal with you because you're like, we're not going to leave anybody behind. And when you get out, a couple things happen. A, Emma says, you've returned from the jail, right? So that's where we get this terminology that we've been using this episode of, it's called a jail. And additionally, Sophia is nowhere. And then, oh my, Sophia is on your phone because actually she's an AI and has been an AI the whole time. And you're like, why didn't you tell us you were an AI? And she's like, you never asked.
Yep.
Which is a fair answer, to be honest.
Yeah. It's one of those cute moments where like, logically this didn't come up in conversation, so why would I have just offered it freely, sort of thing from her.
So I want to point out something here that I love about Sophia, and it might be one of those earworm things where if you haven't noticed it yet and I say it, you might never be able to unhear it, and I'm sorry about that, but it's fine.
Okay.
Sophia's voice acting is incredible. One of the reasons it's incredible is she's got so much personality in the way she delivers things, but also once you learn that she's an AI, you start hearing the way she talks, and if you've ever used a voice assistant like that, she mimics the kind of speech patterns
Oh,
of a voice assistant in really amazingly subtle and clever ways, where like one of the simplest things is like Siri has a very distinct way of saying okay, right? And every time Sophia says okay, she says it like Siri would say it. She says, okay, I'll help you with a way out, right? Like she says this kind of like this cadence to it that's not completely robotic. It's still got personality to it. But like she says those things in a way, and her dialogue is written in a way that makes her feel like a voice assistant.
Yeah.
Like, but also a person. And she just, the voice acting rides that line extraordinarily well. At least I'm playing in English, obviously. So if you're playing in Japanese, I don't know how that translates, but yeah, I love this character. I love that they put that subtlety in there. And the fact that she's an AI, at a certain point you go like, oh yeah, that makes sense with the way she was talking. Like, yeah.
No, yeah, it totally hits those, and I'm looking up because I just want to be able to give credit, but yeah, it hits those, the cadences where it's like, the AI has to think through the key phrases or parts of what it's saying to connect to what you asked it, but it still has to have a little bit of personality, like you were saying, to it. And so I'm looking on behindthevoiceactors.com, so if this is incorrect, but Megan Taylor Harvey is the voice actress in English, and yeah, like does a great job with the cadence, with the inflection, and it feels like it's the performance. It doesn't feel like there's stuff being put over her voice to communicate that.
Yeah, there's even like a Clippy joke at one point.
Oh,
where she's like, it looks like you're trying to do this. Would you like help with it? Like, it's like they really play into it in a fun way.
Yeah.
So you get out, you meet her as an AI. She's just living on your phone. She's like, it's cozy here. Hooray.
Yep.
And you say, we got to go tell the gang that, hey, the metaverse exists and there's a palace or a jail or whatever with a shadow ruler in Shibuya. So you meet back up with the gang. You explain the whole situation. Everyone's like, wow, that's bad. And you introduce Sophia to the group. She is adorable, humming to herself, being adorable. I'm sorry, I love Sophia.
We're just going to need to put like a couple minutes aside for you each week just to like gush about Sophia, I think.
Yeah, no, so, and basically you talk about this with the gang, and they kind of are just like, well, we should probably look into this, right? Is like the conclusion of that conversation.
This is where we get like Morgana noting that things feel a little bit different about this time.
Right.
Especially when it comes to like the humans being attacked, but like we don't know what's going on with them. Emma working like the metanav, but things seem different. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of this conversation, plus the Futaba being interested in Sophia.
Yeah, and you also get a moment where everyone introduces themselves to Sophia, which kind of serves as like, here's who these characters are for new players, right? Yeah, and Futaba gets crazy excited, and then after everybody else leaves and says, well, let's go investigate in Shibuya tomorrow, Futaba sticks around and looks at Sophia's source code and says it's wildly advanced and would take her months to read through it all and understand it, because it's just super complex and amazing and impressive. So she takes it to go like check out on her own computer, but otherwise Sophia is just sort of chilling with you.
Good thing she'll have months of this game to check through that code, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, the last scene in this day is that Sophia wants to like figure out how to be a good companion to humanity, and Morgana says that she needs to understand the human heart, right? So we're bringing the heart themes back into it a little bit more too. Like she needs to understand the human heart and like what people believe and like how they feel emotionally and all that stuff to be a better companion. And that's that.
Yeah, it's pretty much there at the end of it.
We move on to July 26th. We've only got a day and a half left. This scene is like this day is a little funny because they meet back up at Shibuya to scout the jail and decide to kind of ask around and learn about Alice. An also mentions that she like has an opportunity to go to this taping that Alice is doing the next day, so you'll also be able to interact with Alice to some extent, if not directly. So you'll be able to investigate her the next day, but you're going to investigate around her in Shibuya that day. And this is, not to spoil anything, the first of kind of this new sort of gameplay thing within Strikers, which is these investigation scenes, where you actually have a percentage bar at the top of the screen, and it gives you an opportunity to walk around Shibuya and talk to people, get clues, and every time you do, it fills up this percentage bar a little bit, and you got to get it to 100% to finish the investigation.
And the numbers are wild, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I was playing through, and it was like, talk to 2 people at like 12%, talk to one other person, 57% all of a sudden jump, and then it was like another person, 67% or whatever, and then it jumps another 30. Like, it really judges the information you're getting in a funny way, I guess, to a certain extent. But yeah, it's... I do want to say before you jump into this section, you do also, everyone meets up at the bridge that we used to all hang out at.
Yeah, the old hideout.
Yeah, which was a cute little touch, again, of them just...
Big air quotes around hideout.
Yes, yeah, our super secret hideout in public. But yeah, it's a cute little thing. We're all going to kind of go in and investigate. I think we were talking about on that bridge as well of like... questioning whether there were, like, we thought we saw real people, but did we actually see real people? We talked a little bit more about desires being taken and all that.
They determined that probably those were shadow people, right? Because if they were real people, there would be news reports about dozens of people going missing, right? And that's probably not true or didn't happen or hasn't happened. Yeah, and you learn about Alice basically, like, a lot of messed up stuff, right? Like, you learn that she, like, people are way too obsessed with her. Like, there's a guy in the back alley by EY's shop, like, taking money from a loan shark in order to buy Alice's new album. Her new clothing line thing sold out in, like, 10 minutes or something like that. Yeah. There's people, like, leaving their girlfriends just to be with her or wanting to be with her. So it's too much obsession. Yeah, it's like clearly crossed the line, and I think those two guys were like the dudes we saw in the metaverse, or like one of them was one of them. Forgive me, yeah. And so we're learning a little bit there, but yeah, you kind of get a sense, and it's nice again to, like we said before, walk around Central Street, and you can kind of like check into the stores that you would go to previously, or like check into locations. It also sets up here the like you'll talk to your teammates outside of stuff, like they are all around the map, and it's worth talking to everyone because some of them will give you items. Like I just wanted to catch up with everyone, but I'm glad, by the train station I talked to, I think Yusuke, and he gives me an item, and I went to Central Street and someone else gave me an item, and it's like, it's good to check in with everyone. And you also get fun Easter eggs like the movie Makoto wants to go see. Yes. Because she goes to the movie theater and wants to go see Dragon Like a Yakuza. I didn't say it because I was wondering if that was going to be perhaps a pop quiz later on. No. That one's easy. Okay. Yeah, so... Oh, yeah, they actually go to the jail here. I forgot about that part, too. In the very beginning, yeah. At the very beginning of this, they do go to the jail to kind of, like, just to see it, but then they leave almost immediately, right? Yeah. And that's where they discuss the desire stuff. So they get the intel and they basically decide, Alice is weird and we should probably continue to investigate her because something strange is happening. And then it goes to the next day, which is July 27th, which will be our last day for today, but it is kind of a packed one before we get to the act. Well, it's actually a really packed one for reasons we'll get into later. Yeah. So the first thing that happens is you're leaving Leblanc and you see the Inspector Hasegawa from that intro cop scene just chilling, eating curry, having a great time. Yeah. And he seems to at least be like he's been there multiple times. It seems like I think he calls Sojiro boss or whatever, which is like obviously kind of what everyone calls him. Maybe that's just a colloquial thing, but it seemed like he was comfortable enough to be there. But and he liked the curry a lot, and he didn't do anything weird. He just was there eating curry. Immediately. And again, as I've said, I played a little bit of this game, but not too much, and so I don't remember much of what I played, and in the back of my head I'm like, does he know already? Is he just coincidentally, like, people know who Joker is, so they know where Joker was. They like raided the house you would assume, in the first game. Yeah, but
Interesting.
He knows. On and Morgana and Joker go to that talk show set.
Yep.
Hey!
It's back.
And watch a taping of a talk show with Alice, which she talks about how she wants to be a light for the world, and then talks about her fashion industry or her fashion design stuff and how she got into it. And then the host of one of the hosts who is engaged to the other host.
I loved that they revealed that after.
Yeah, suddenly has some sort of mental break where he gets on his hands and knees and tells Alice that he needs to be with her forever and is madly in love with her.
Yeah, it's and then a little bit later the other announcer's like, "What about me?" Which is just so great. It's so like, what is happening?
It's super
here?
over the top in a great way.
It's so like soap operatic. But yeah, everyone starts freaking out. Pandemonium ensues. Alice acts a little bit like, "Oh, what is this? This is strange, huh? What are you doing?" kind of thing. But yeah.
And then On and Joker go and regroup in the pancakes hallway.
Yep. I was listening so hard to every word, being like, what's going to be said here that's going to matter 60 hours from now?
Yeah, I mean, this conversation is a little bit more explicit than the pancakes conversation.
Yeah, and there's a payoff more quickly. But yeah.
Yeah, so On and Joker basically and Morgana have this conversation about like how probably Desires getting stolen is the same as when they stole Desires, right, to a certain extent, in that it causes a change of heart, and that basically if a ruler of a jail steals someone's desires, then they like have control over them seemingly, or like that's what they're theorizing, and that she must have done that to this host, right? And then they go and hide because they hear Alice coming, and Alice's assistant person is like, could you please stop destroying people's lives, maybe? And she, like, hits him in the face and kicks him to the ground and is like, no.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, a really mean person doing kind of exactly what her shadow was doing.
Without any doubt, it's kind of like, whether you think, this darker side of her, it also adds that little bit of difference where, like, we know people were acting badly, but I feel like we just see such a direct version of this. Like, the way she behaves here is how you would expect and how she does act in the jail immediately. Like, the mask is off instantly with her.
Yeah, it's a very different sort of vibe to what we usually get. Like, I mean, the people who were bad in Persona 5, the palace rulers, were bad immediately in the real world too, but also, like, there was some sort of difference, right?
There was subterfuge to them that almost we didn't even get to see. I feel like at times.
Sure.
Like, we would hear about things, obviously, with, Madarame and Kamoshida. Like, very early on, we knew how awful they were. But the worst versions of it, we mostly saw in the palace. But here it feels like we also see it in the real world kind of instantly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very... The similarities, the, like, direct similarities are stark, right? Like, it's very clear. And also the other thing that is a big difference right away is that An runs in to confront her and say, hey, stop doing this. And she says, oh, hey, I recognize you. You're a model. Here, have my friend keyword. Let's be friends. And An is like, screw you. I would never be friends with someone as mean as you. And she looks at Joker and is like, oh, wait, how about you? I think I already gave you one. And so, like, clearly, to some extent, Alice knows that people adding her on Emma is making them subservient to her, right? She is, we don't know the extent of it yet, but, like, there is culpability here in terms of what the metaverse is doing to people that there never was with the palace rulers in Persona 5, where they had no idea any of that was happening or existed or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's what helps lend to that immediacy, because I definitely don't want to imply that we didn't think all the awful people who ruled palaces were bad.
No, they
people.
were horrible right away.
They were all horrible. Yeah, it was just sort of like
Kamoshida is like pretty unequivocally like pure evil, just immediately.
Evil. I think it was just more that we like saw them act on that behavior in a knowing, like we see Alice act in a knowing way, like you're saying, that it affects, like, she's abusing the power because the power gives her something that she knows she gets.
The other thing is that the villains, the palace rulers in Persona 5, their palace versions are almost caricatures of their bad behavior, right? Where, like, Kamoshida literally has, like, a dungeon where he has volleyball kids getting shot with volleyball cannons in the face repeatedly, right?
Yeah.
Which is, like, yes, he's, like, terrorizing those kids in real life, but, like, that is, like, a cartoon villain level of what he is doing in the palace, right? Whereas, like, the thing that Alice is doing in the palace is very similar. Like, they do a direct comparison for knocking a guy over and stepping on his face, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is, they show exactly 1-to-1 what she did in the palace in real life. Yeah. And I think that's the distinction I was trying to make.
No, totally. Me too as well, yeah. Because I think it's, again, plays into that very clear, like, immediate danger of what's happening and that knowing danger here of the two worlds intersecting. And also, like, to your point of An, I like that she does rush in here because we are dealing with the group, you know, post having saved the world, post having gone through this 8 or whatever times. Like, they're a bit more used to standing up for things, whereas, you know, earlier on when they weren't sure of their powers, you know, they had to kind of, like, play it a little quieter and more reserved. But here they can just rush in. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. So the gang regroups and says, yeah, boy, she sounds awful. Let's change her heart.
Yeah.
So they decide to change her heart. Morgana has gotten some scent of something that they describe as a treasure-like scent in the jail. So they might have this treasure to steal to change the hearts. They kind of re-explain the mechanics of that if you're new. And Sophia, and they're like, well, why don't we just take out why don't we just take the, like, kill her? Why don't we just kill her? And Sophia's like, yeah, let's just do a murder. We can just do a murder. That's fine. What's wrong with doing a murder? That'll make the world better.
Death is an acceptable outcome.
Yeah.
Is what she says, I think. Yeah.
And so they have to have this moment with Sophia where they're, like, teaching her the code of the Phantom Thieves, but also trying to, like, explain that doing a murder is a bad. And she determines that since she doesn't have a heart, right, she doesn't understand that part of humanity, but she wants to.
Yeah.
And so you make a deal where she joins the Phantom Thieves to learn about the human heart more and humanity, and she'll be a better companion and help you out, and that's the thing. And then that unlocks bond skills.
Well, more importantly, it unlocks her Phantom Thief name.
Oh, yes, excuse me. Which they give her Phantom Thief name is Sophie.
Whoa, who could she be?
Not Sophia. And no. Ryuji even calls it out, right? Ryuji's even like, that's like the same name, y'all.
Yeah, and they're kind of like, well, it's a little bit like Morgana and Mona, sort of. And I'm like,
right.
It's one letter, my dudes.
Yeah, it's not even. Sophia, they spell Sophie with an E at the end. It's literally the same number of letters.
Yeah, you're right.
It's fewer in, I don't know if the names are exactly the same. I assume they are in Japanese. It's fewer characters in Japanese.
Okay.
So that's probably part of it.
Yeah.
Right. But,
anyway,
yeah, it's just very funny.
Yeah.
It's very funny that her nickname is Sophie when her name is Sophia.
It's very good.
But also, like, she's an AI that doesn't exist in the real world, so it's not like she needs a code name for any reason.
Exactly. It kind of does work because it's like, who's going to reveal her identity at this point, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, as you were saying, we form a strong bond, which becomes a mechanic.
Yeah, so we got the bond skills, which is this new system. Essentially, we won't go into super detailed here because we just unlocked the system, but, like, instead of, like, companions, right, where you have confidants that level up and get these new skills and all that stuff, you have this bond system where it's like, as you do things, you get bond points that you can spend on basically this, like, big board of skills that will get you new things, like either upgrade stats or upgrade the amount of money you get from fights, or, you know, unlock new things like Harrison recovery. Like, all of that stuff is in this bond skill system rather than being in confidant levels and social link stuff. So basically they've taken all of the individual social links and just put them into one system together. Yeah. Again, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, taking a big system of Persona 5 and condensing it into something that is more digestible for what this game is.
Yeah.
And then you say, all right, let's go buy weapons and drugs because we got to go fight this lady today because this is the new Phantom Thieves.
We don't wait around.
We do not wait around. We got summer vacation to go on. And conveniently, Takemi's clinic is closed because she's out for the summer, and Iwai's store is closed because he's out for the summer. But the Velvet Room is open. And so you go to the Velvet Room, and this really quickly introduces you to also the somewhat simplified persona system, which is a little bit more straightforward. Honest to God, we'll get into this more as we get into it, but like I really like this system. I think it does a very good job simplifying how persona management happens. But the newest thing here is that there's these persona points that you get as you get multiple of a persona mask or anything like that, and you can use those to like level up your persona. And there's still fusion and buying and that sort of things here too. So you go back, and the kind of last story beat before you get going is you say, all our stores are closed, and we can't deliver online because it would take too long. And Sophia is just like, nah, we're good. What do you want? And Ryuji's just like, a gold bar as a random aside, and then suddenly within moments, a gold bar arrives at their door. And I love how much these kids just become dweebs immediately.
Yep.
They're just all immediately like, oh my god, what do we do? We're going to jail. Yep. This is illegal. Oh, do we tell the cops? Do we not tell the cops? What do we do? Where'd this gold come from? Is this illegal? What's happening? Like, they just immediately lose it.
It's so good because it's like, you would think they bought just like all the drugs in the world, but it's just like a gold bar that they got. And it turns out to actually be that. But yeah, they all panic around the box. They're like, you open it. No, you open it. I don't want to look in there. Ryuji, it's your fault. You should go do it. And they're all like freaking out about it. Yeah, it's a really great moment of showing that, like, at the end of the day, this amazing band of world-saving teens are teens still.
Yeah.
And they're still kids. And I think plays that balance here really well. And as we learn, it's not from the greatest source. Like, it is not an ideal. It is, I think Sophia basically is like, yeah, it's the dark web, and I use crypto to buy it that's untraceable, and you owe me money now.
Yeah. I love that she's like, I'll send you a bill.
Yep. Yeah, I'll invoice you all for this that you made me do. But yeah, I love that they return it.
Yeah.
And the dude instantly, like, that guy must have, I really like to imagine the delivery dude got to the Yanganjaya, like, train station, and then immediately got hey, you got to turn around, man. I was like, oh, god damn it. All right. And picks up the gold bar. But yeah.
I mean, seemingly that gold bar was like next door.
You would assume.
So
I bet it's probably like that old man that used to like sit around in Yanganjaya. He's probably running this gamut.
Yeah,
for sure.
So the long and short of this is Sophia decides she's going to curate a list of items that you can buy with expedited delivery, and then you just pay her for that. So the shop, again, condensing everything, all of the shops are now one shop. They are Sophia's shop, and that's where you buy accessories, it's where you buy healing items, it's where you buy protectors and weapons. And suddenly, as is what happens when you have a party of 9 people or 8 people or whatever right away, is you now could just buy all of that for everybody, except you don't have the money to do so.
Yeah. Money's a little harder to come by right now.
Yeah. I put my bond skill points into more bond skills, and more money from fights.
I think I did the 2 more bond skills, absolutely. Obviously, you know the system deeper than I do, but I was like, I probably am going to want the bond skills as quickly as possible, so I put into that twice, and then I think I did... I'll have to look it back up. I forget what the third thing was, but I did something that I think was maybe battle-related. It might have been money. It could have been XP. It was something, I think, battle-related.
That's always what I do in RPGs like this, is like, the earlier you can get the resource that gets you more of the resource you're spending on it, it feels like the better, because you'll just get more of it over the course of the game, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. I bought, I think Ryuji a weapon or something because I love him. And then that's it. You just are like, let's go.
Let's go to this.
This is one of the biggest differences between Persona 5 and this, is because Persona 5 was so restricted to the calendar and so beholden to the calendar, and every time you went into the palace, it spent a time unit of that day or whatever. it really mattered when it was like palace start, whereas this was like there's been a whole day of like plot, and now you're just like, all right, palace is open, go ahead. And this marks a huge shift in this game where the palace doesn't have, like, you can come and go in the palace as much as you want. Mm-hmm. It's a very different pace from Persona 5, and this is not saying it's better or worse. Persona 5 had this sort of like this marathon sort of pacing to its palaces where you had to pace yourself and you had to really make sure you could make it to the next safe room, or if you needed to leave early, that would be fine, and you had to watch your items and your health and all this stuff as you went along. Strikers is just like, we'll get into this more as we play through it, but like, you can come and go into the palace as many times or into the jail as many times as you want. And so if you just wanted to grind like crazy, get a ton of money, come back out, go to the shop, buy all the items, and then go back in, you can just do that. So it's really different. And it's fine that it's really different because it's a very different style of gameplay, right? So it doesn't need to be the same. It's just very different.
Well, it's like, as you were saying, like, Persona 5 was built around time progressing. This game is built around progressing the game. Like, you're progressing time rather than time just being the progress that you have to keep up with. So yeah, here it's very much the palace is the next thing you have to do. It's the only thing you can do. So that is the kind of, the focus of it.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah. And that's what we'll do next week.
Hooray! So that's it for this first episode of Take Your Time, Season 2. I'm glad we took the time to really dive into the character, some of the new systems, some of the story setup. I think it's a good intro. It is just a little slow from the perspective of like someone who knows most of this stuff already. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot of talking, right? But like also 2.5 hours to get to like, hey, you're in the palace, go ahead, is not like a crazy amount of time or anything.
No, especially
it's not slow.
Especially knowing, I guess, like, it's slight spoilers, but I don't really think it is. But essentially that, like, the palace is the next thing you're doing. You're not jumping back out to go, get supplies for your summer camp stuff planned or whatever. Like, this is the next thing we're gonna do. So the jail is the next discussion point that we'll be jumping into. I do think it's like we said, and I'm glad we did split it up, seeing how long it's taken us to get through it all. There is a lot to talk about in that setup, and I think a lot that even as returning players to the world of Persona, a lot to get through to like establish the expectations for what this game is going to be.
Yeah, and I think it does a good job. I think it does a good job of setting up what's different, what's the same, what's going on in the Phantom Thieves' heads. I think it's very funny that, they investigated this person for like 1.5 days, and then we're like, well, time to change the heart. Let's go. Yep. And they even admit to a certain extent that they don't really know because they don't know what the deal with the treasure is. It's just kind of like their main lead right now is like, let's look into this place more.
Yeah.
Which we will next time. So, for those of you who don't know, who might just be joining us, we do a little thing at the end of episodes where we have pop quizzes. I almost didn't want to do a pop quiz this season because it's summer vacation and there are none. But I decided to keep it going because people like it and it's fun. So I have a question. Jonathon, you said you're going to figure out something potentially for Persona Pseudonym because it's kind of a different sort of deal this time.
So yeah, we were talking before the show and I haven't come up with anything quite yet. But essentially, for those who didn't listen again, go ahead, go listen to that first season. We, each week I would make Tom guess and the audience at home what a persona would essentially be called a different name before you captured it, before you like understood its true nature. And so usually I would give the pseudonym, Tom would have to guess. Got more right than I honestly expected because I couldn't get probably any. So you did well. But,
thanks.
It's one of those things where at least starting right now, we obviously haven't encountered too many personas, but ones we did are returning. And I'm sure I've mentioned some of them already as pseudonyms. And so it felt like doing the same thing over again would probably not be, even if there are new personas coming up, like, I don't know, it wouldn't, I feel like, be beneficial to just retread the names. So I haven't quite come up with a replacement. Obviously, if anyone has suggestions out there, maybe people who've played Strikers, without spoilers, of course, but if there's something that like to allude to or anything comes to mind, like, please let me know in the comments. But I'm going to kind of be thinking as we get into the next palace, something to also put us all to the test.
Well, I have something. My pop quizzes, instead of focusing on personas, focus on little details, conversations, things hidden in the background. This one is less not hidden in the background, but I wanted to start off a little bit more straightforward, see if people could remember a detail that was one of my favorite moments from this intro section. So, my question for this week, which you, the viewers and listeners, can respond to. When they first go into the jail as a group, it's the first time that everyone is meeting Sophia and realizing that in the metaverse she has a body, and everyone is over the moon with how adorable she is, as am I. An asks if she can do something to her outfit. What does An ask to do to Sophia's outfit? And for bonus points, because I think some people will probably get that okay, why does she say no? So that's the question. What does An ask to do to Sophia's outfit, and what's Sophia's reasoning for saying no?
I am maybe it's just because I haven't had much coffee today, but I am struggling with an answer.
Let us know in the comments at Dornology, or youtube.com/Dornology. You can send us an email at dornology@gmail.com. I'm at Tom R. Marks on Twitter. He's at JM Dornbush on Twitter. And thank you again. If you are enjoying the show, obviously this is the start of the new season, please leave a review on whatever podcasting platform you like to do that on. If you're enjoying it, it really does help us out. And obviously there's still a ton of people listening to the first season and playing through that, and that's great. We want to encourage that, and we'd love to get people in through this one as well, because half the reason we do this is because we just think it's fun and enjoy it and like doing it with the community. So
yeah,
we'd love to have you involved.
It's been so awesome to continue to see that like warm, wonderful, I think positive community that's risen up around the show. So like, thank you to everyone out there. That support really just helps us get the show in front of more supportive people, because there's more people now probably than ever playing Persona, especially in just a couple months from when we're recording this. There will be even more. So yeah, thank you for continuing to show that support.
Next week we'll be talking about the first jail, so you don't want to miss it. And thanks very much, and we'll see you then.